very beginning, I had a question for Mr. Diaconescu about what is the meaning of making such a move of the Romanian embassy, and I will tell you a little bit because I saw his positions in different media. He spoke about that. The main idea is that not only this goes against the constitutional order in Romania, but also it's against a number of UN resolutions, starting especially with the ones in 1967 following the war, and then there were about 14 resolutions concerning the status of the city of Jerusalem. The latest was I think in 2016, and that's only the UN Security Council. There were resolutions of the UN General Assembly, but they have a different legal power. That was one point. Another point was that Romania managed during the past several decades to play the part of broker, not only between the state of Israel and the Palestinians, but also in general in the Middle East, between the Israelis and the Arabs. So, Mr. Levy, I want to start with this. We as Romanians like to imagine that we have a word to say in the Middle East, and we are playing this part of a broker. But what's the perception over there? Does Romania have any importance? Convincing Romania to move the embassy to Jerusalem is a matter of getting more states to move, like Guatemala, for instance, which is not a major influencer in world affairs, or creating a bridge inside the EU, maybe. What's your opinion on that?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank you for coming. Thank you, the organizers, for inviting me. It's my first visit, and my partner Katrin and I are here only 24 hours, but we fall in love with Bucharest, I must tell you. And we are already planning the next visit very soon, because we are leaving tomorrow. And we really, really liked what we saw, and we liked the people we met, and the views we saw. And thank you, obviously, for hosting me here. As for your question, I'm not here to tell Romania what to do. I hardly know by myself what shall I do. So I will go and say what Romania will do. That is by far exaggerated. I can ask myself, as an Israeli, what does it serve to move the embassy to Jerusalem? What does it serve? If Romania would have said that Romania is moving its embassy to Jerusalem, even though I recommend to your ambassador to stay in Tel Aviv. It's much a nicer place, and he will enjoy his life much more in Tel Aviv. It's a more normal place. There is a sea and many other reasons why to stay in Tel Aviv. I remember the Romanian embassy, which is in the same place for so many years, because as you remember, you were the only embassy that didn't close down when all the Russian bloc closed down. Romania remained the only East European country which maintained relations with Israel, and Israel appreciated it highly. And the embassy was in Tel Aviv and is in Tel Aviv. And the question is, why to move it to Jerusalem? If Romania would have moved it to Jerusalem and at the same time declared that it's going to open also another embassy in East Jerusalem for the coming Palestinian state, then I would think this might be a clever step, even though it's premature, because the Palestinian state is right now farther than ever. But moving an embassy now only to Jerusalem, only to West Jerusalem, is really doing two things. It's giving an award to the occupier without demanding from him anything. And it is a slap in the face in the occupied people, who who live under this brutal occupation now for over 50 years, and they see how gradually the world is leaving them, the world is supporting more and more the occupation, the occupier. And one should ask yourself, does Israel, which violates one international resolution after the other, ever since 48 and 67, does Israel really deserve a reward from the international community? Israel that ignores the international community for so many years, do we really deserve an encouragement, a prize, a reward? Do we really deserve recognition of West Jerusalem as the capital, which is fine, and ignoring totally the fact that in the land of Israel, Palestine, there are two peoples, not one people. And those peoples share equal rights in this piece of land. And if you privilege one side and totally ignore the other side, in other words, you join the right-wingers in Israel who never recognized a Palestinian state, who never recognized the Palestinians even as human beings like us, who never recognized any right for the Palestinian in this piece of land. You should ask himself, I think any man of conscience, any man who respects the international law, any man who thinks about justice, excuse me for this high word, anyone who thinks about justice, relative justice, should ask himself, is it really the right step to do? To reward the occupier and to ignore and punish the occupied one? Does this make sense? Is this kind of justice? And coming back to your question about Romania as a broker, Romania was a broker in other times. The United States took over. And the only broker that could have been until now, the real one who had really influence and power, was the United States. Let's face it. The United States declared in this regime, it puts an end to the masquerade. Because President Trump declared three things. A, the United States is not an even-handed, it's not a fair broker. I think it never was, but at least he said it clearly. We are one-sided, we are with the occupier, we are with Israel, and we don't give a damn about the Palestinians. The second thing that he declared, and we should remember this as well, that's the end of the two-state solution. Because if you recognize Jerusalem only as the capital of Israel, in other words, you say there will never be a Palestinian state. We'll get later to this because I think it is important to realize that there will never be a two-state solution, but we can get to it later. And the third thing, which Donald Trump did, is to slap at the face of the Palestinians like no American president did before, to push them to the corner and to tell them you have no rights in this piece of the land. Do you want to join this? That's your choice.
Yes, but leaving aside all the arguments with Jerusalem being the eternal and undivided capital of Israel, there is an argument that makes sense, and that is that every state, every country has a right to choose its own capital. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, one of the arguments for the U.S. moving the embassy to Jerusalem was that the peace process was anyway blocked for a good number of years, and this could be a step of pushing it back into action, let's say.
You are right. Every country, every state has the right to declare any city as its own capital, as long as the city is under sovereignty, which is a legitimate sovereignty, which is recognized by the international community. This is not the case with Jerusalem. Jerusalem was never recognized by the international community as the capital of Israel, even not West Jerusalem. And for many good reasons. Because the international community said already in 48 that Jerusalem should remain an international entity. Jerusalem might become a capital of two cities, it might become two capitals, it might become capital of one state, but by the end of the day, you cannot declare it while totally ignoring the other people. I must remind you here that already today, between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, there are more or less 50-50, 50% Jews, 50% Palestinians, including obviously Gaza, which is part of Palestine. So we are dealing with two peoples. If you ignore one people, you don't only ignore international law, you ignore any basic rule of justice, because you totally ignore them. You say, no, you don't have any rights, it's only for the Jews. This is unacceptable. You say that Jerusalem is united. I don't know many more divided cities than Jerusalem. And each of you who have been there knows it. It's the most divided city in the world. If you go there, you have two parts. The West, where the Jews are living, prosperity, freedom, very little army or military or police presence. And then you cross to the East, and you face the Israeli brutality and the Israeli discrimination. And you see how many budgets go there, how many soldiers patrol there, how human rights are violated there every day and every hour, how there's even not a beginning of equality between Jews and Palestinians in this state, in this city. So, you know, it's again, you want to encourage this, that's your right. But you encourage injustice, you encourage occupation, and you encourage violation of international law, nothing else does this.
Part of East Jerusalem, it's also the old city of Jerusalem, and that's actually the main point of contention, because it's the most important city for two of the Abrahamic religions, and the second most important city for the third. Now, because those of us who have been to Jerusalem know that it's quite easy to move around the city. Do you think this would be a viable solution if, let's say, at some point in the future you divide Jerusalem, to have a border over there in such an important city? How this could be done?
First of all, with all due respect, let me correct you. Jerusalem is not open to all religions, and it's not open to all people. If you are a Palestinian living in Gaza, you can just dream about Jerusalem. You have no chance to get to Jerusalem, even though Jerusalem is 1.5 hour drive from Gaza. So let's not speak about freedom of religion there or freedom of movement, because freedom of movement, yes, for the Christians, for the Jews, for part of the Palestinians. But there's a big part of Palestinians who can only dream to get to Jerusalem, even from the West Bank. You need to be from a certain age, usually 55, in order to get freely to Jerusalem. If you are younger, you might apply for a special certificate to get into license, to get into Jerusalem. Usually you won't get it. So let's put this clear. Jerusalem today and in the last 50 years under the Israeli occupation is not open for all religions. It's not open for all people. By all means not. Now, we are dealing about a different situation. I'm not sure that there should be a border in Jerusalem, but we are dealing about a situation in which there will be some kind of agreement and some kind of peace. And then obviously Jerusalem must be open to everyone. But when I say everyone, it is yes, including people from Gaza, including people from Arab states. It must be open for everybody. And as long as this is not the case, you have to realize that East Jerusalem is an occupied territory, exactly like Nablus, exactly like Jenin, exactly like Gaza, exactly like Hebron. It is occupied, an occupation which is not recognized by no country in the world, including not the United States. And you know, by the end of the day, you have to look at the reality. It is half-occupied city, or occupied, half of it is occupied. Do you want to support this? Again, I ask you, do you want to support this, or you want to get to a solution in which this situation will finally end? And again, if you move your embassy to West Jerusalem, you tell the Palestinians, forget about Jerusalem.
You mentioned Gaza a lot, and Gaza was on the news when the U.S. Embassy moved to Jerusalem. We saw there were a lot of violences there, at least 60 people killed, several thousand wounded, many of them by live ammunition fired by the Israeli Defense Force. And one interesting point, we'll get back to the violence in a minute, was that you mentioned that, I also saw it in some news story, people in Israel didn't really seem to care much about what was happening at the fence. The most important topics during that day and the following days were the moving of the American embassy to Jerusalem and Israel winning the Eurovision contest, about the music contest in Eurovision. So what does that say? Is there a mentality of ignoring what's happening just, as you said, 1.5 hours from Jerusalem, I think less from Tel Aviv? People don't care, people are not told. What's your opinion on that?
First of all, if you mentioned the Eurovision, I must complain because Romania gave 0 points to Israel, which shows something about Romania. Huh?
We gave them to Moldavia.
Sorry?
We gave our coins to Moldavia.
Rightly so. In any case, Israel won, and we have to appreciate it. But coming back to your topic, which is a key issue. Listen, Israeli society in the last 50 years, or maybe in the last 70 years, is a society in denial like I know very few societies in the world. I wrote today in my article that if on last Monday Israeli soldiers would have killed 60 dogs, I can assure you it would have become much a bigger scandal in Israel than killing 60 unarmed demonstrators. I think that the soldiers who killed those 60 dogs would have been punished. I think that Israel would have been really shocked by this, that soldiers killed 60 dogs in one day. But killing 60 Palestinians was, as you say, the third item in the news and really shocked very, very few Israelis. I can say even more. There is a minority of Israelis who would like to see more Palestinians killed. You see them in the social media. I don't know how many there are, but for sure there is a minority which also was very happy about killing 60 and even asking why only 60. But this is an outcome of many, many years of dehumanizing the Palestinian and demonizing it. It didn't start today and not 1 year ago. You must understand, if you maintain such a brutal occupation like the Israeli occupation, which is really a brutal tyranny, like very few tyrannies in the world today. When you maintain such an occupation in a quite liberal society, because the Israeli Jewish society is a liberal society with liberal values, and democratic values. If you want to maintain this brutal occupation in your backyard, you have to hide it. You have to ignore it, to deny it. You have to find justifications day and night to justify your behavior. Because by the end of the day, the Israelis are not monsters, by all means not. And in order to live with this reality, you have to close your eyes, to close your hearts, to close your ears. Because otherwise you cannot maintain such brutality for so many years. And therefore there is this systematic campaign of explaining the Israelis that the Palestinians were born to kill, that all of them are terrorists, that they only want to kick us to the ocean, on one hand. And on the other hand, that we are the chosen people, and as a chosen people we have all the rights in the world, like no one else. That the international law doesn't apply on us because we are the chosen people, because God had promised us this piece of land. You have to tell yourself all the time that any Palestinian who is killed because of his blame, not because of our blame. The 60 people who were killed in Gaza were presented in the mass Israeli media as responsible for their deaths. And if they are not responsible, it's the Hamas responsible. But we, the massacres, we have no responsibility whatsoever. Even not a partial responsibility, nothing. More than this, if you dare to express some kind of solidarity, some kind of sorrow for 60 people killed in one day, if you want to express some kind of sorrow, immediately you are portrayed either as a lunatic or as a traitor. Even on the most basic human ground. You need it. Because if you want this occupation to continue, you have to continue with this campaign telling the Israelis that the Palestinians are not only the enemy, they are the demon, all of them. There are no innocent Palestinians, there are no unarmed Palestinians. Because even when they are unarmed, they are armed. Because anything they do is terror. When they appeal to the international community, to the Security Council, they call it diplomatic terror. Diplomatic terror. Have you ever heard this term? Diplomatic terror. When they try to march in a non-violent resistance to the fence, they are terrorists. Even if they don't shoot one shot, even if they don't have nothing in their hands except of some mirrors and some kites, you say, Katrin? Kites.
Yes.
Some kites. We have now a very dangerous terror of kites. And Israelis believe in it. And it is an existential threat to the state of Israel, those kites. It's almost an anti-Semitic weapon to fly kites.
Yes, but those were burning kites designed to burn the fields. I'm talking about that protest because the Palestinian narrative, it's non-violent protests brutally quashed by the Israeli military. On the other hand, I've seen these protests in the West Bank, and they're not non-violent. Because, of course, they're not shooting back. It's not an armed attempt to invade Israel. But the protesters are throwing rocks, are burning tires, and so on. So quite violent for some unprepared force, let's say just regular police, would have maybe difficulties to stop those. That's on the one hand. The second thing that let's say not shocked, but surprised me a bit, and I had some discussions with Palestinians about that, was that there were lots of children, some of them by themselves rushing towards the wall, some of them really young with their parents in the first rows of the protesters. Of course, when the tear gas is shot and the rubber bullets and so on, those children will become victims. And one of the narratives in Israel this time is that the Palestinians, some of them the militants, are using the children in order to get victimized and to get the attention of the international community. That's on the one hand. Another narrative of the Israeli government is that Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, is behind this protest, and they're trying to provoke victims among the Palestinians to push them to escalate the war for exactly the same purpose. So it's a bit, I think, more complex than the usual black and white on the one hand or the other.
This doesn't work. Stop talking. Yeah. I'm very happy you asked those questions, because this is really the Israeli line, and one should answer this. First of all, also according to the international law, occupied people have the right to resist an occupation. And if you check who is the real violent side, the occupation is the real violence. You know, many times they portrayed in the Israeli media that the Palestinians are violating the order. Now, what is the order? The order is that the occupier can go whenever he wants, with tanks, with soldiers, with any forces, any place, get into homes in the middle of the night, kidnap people, kidnap children, shoot. He has the right to do everything. If someone throws a stone at the occupier, this is violation of the order. Because the order is a very clear order. The order is that the occupier has the right to do anything he wants. And the occupied one has no right whatsoever, even not to resist, in a violent way or not a violent way. So first of all, let's put this in place. Now, I want to ask all of you, if you would have been put in a cage for 11 years, without any possibility to get out of this cage, any possibility, young generation who has no perspective for his life, with 60% unemployment among the youngsters, without any perspective, not to the future, not to the present. How do you think people would have reacted? Because what Israel and Egypt had done is one of the most cruel experiments in human beings in history. Let's put 2 million people in a cage and let's see how do they behave. And I can tell you that the behavior of the Palestinians in Gaza is one of the most tolerant behaviors that one could even imagine himself. Many times I can't understand how can they resist and not go wild. How come there is so little violence by them? And then, when Gaza is silent, and there are times in which Gaza is silent, between one brutal attack of Israel and the other, when Gaza is silent, everyone forgets about Gaza. Nobody talks about Gaza. Let them die. They sit 1, 2, 3 years. It's a cycle of every 3-4 years. A kind of war. You can't call it war because it's not two armies fighting. But every 2, 3, 4 years there is this operation of the Israeli army against Gaza. But between those years, in most of the times, Gaza is very silent. And then what happens, you think? Anyone cares about Gaza? Anyone opens Gaza to the world? Anyone gives any kind of freedom to Gaza? Nothing. Gaza is totally forgotten when it's not violent. So what do you expect the Palestinians in Gaza to do? What? If they sit still, nothing is happening, the world is forgetting them. You know, there is a UN report, not Israeli, not Palestinian, UN official report that in the year of 2020, Gaza will be a place where human beings will not be able to live anymore. Because of water, because of environment. We are in 2018, it's in 2 years. You think that anybody cares about it? Anybody does something about it? 2 million people living there. In 2 years, they can't live there anymore. You think that anybody is doing something? And now comes all the justification of the Israeli propaganda. It is the Hamas. They are sending children. they are forcing the young people to go to the fence. I can tell you, from my own knowledge and experience, young people in Gaza don't need the Hamas to push them to go to the fence. And they don't need to be paid, as Israel is claiming, to go to the fence. Their desperation is so deep that they have nothing to lose. You really believe that there is any regime who can send people to their deaths to commit suicide in the fence only because Hamas told them to do so? Tens of thousands of people go only because Hamas told them? Again, a way of Israel to say, no, it's not our blame, it's only their blame. No. Desperation in Gaza is so deep. Would I be born in Gaza? I don't know what I would have done. I don't think that any one of us here can imagine himself. What does it mean to live in Gaza, especially in the last 11 years? But let's remember that Gaza was always the toughest place, with half of the population in refugee camps. And you should see those refugee camps. Many years, it's now almost the 5th generation of people without future, without present, without nothing. What do you expect them to do? And yes, Hamas is not my cup of tea. I am secular. They are religious, fundamentalist, whatever. But they were, by the way, elected in democratic elections in Gaza.
12 years ago.
Yeah.
And there were no
Absolutely.
elections since.
By the way, 12 years ago also the PLO was elected in the West Bank, and no elections ever since then. I don't think that you can play democracy under occupation in any case. Those elections have not much meaning. But by the end of the day, with Hamas, without Hamas, people who live in a cage for so many years are desperate. And they can do many things. And by the way, they have the right to do many things. And by the end of the day, if they are shot by live ammunition, tens and tens killed, hundreds and hundreds injured, and by the way, when you say injured, people think about, light injuries. Part of those thousands will remain handicapped forever. I want to tell you a very short story. 2 weeks ago, I went to Hebron to see one of those young people who was injured by the fence from Gaza. Israel let 3-4 of them only to be transferred to hospitals in the West Bank. Also, Israeli humanity, not to let them get medical treatment because hospitals in Gaza are collapsing with all those thousands of injuries. So they let 3, 4, 5 also under threats of the Supreme Court of Israel, who forced them to let them go. I went to meet 2 of them, but I want to speak about one of them. We went to Hebron to see him there. This guy is 23 years old. He has 2 babies at home. One is half-year-old and one is 2.5 years old. He's not working now over a year because he can't find any work. Nothing. No income whatsoever. Israel had bombed his house in 2014, and ever since then the house is in ruins. Nothing left. Nobody had reconstructed his house. He has to rent a house together with his parents and brothers, and he has no money to pay for it because he has no income whatsoever. So soon he will be kicked out from his house because the landlord tells him, listen, if you don't pay the rent, I have to send you away. And now he went to the fence out of anger, out of desperation. And he went to the fence and he was shot twice. Once in his stomach, once in his leg. Severely injured. And this guy lies in Hebron in the hospital. They let his mother come with him, so they sit there alone day and night. And he doesn't know what will be tomorrow with him. He has no money, no income, no home, nothing. What do you expect from such a young man to do? What can he do in order to have some kind of normal life? Can you really blame him for anything? Isn't it our responsibility, first of all, Israel, Egypt as well, the international community as well? Can we really put everything on Hamas and say, no, we are clean, we have nothing to do with it. When we put the siege, when we were occupying them for tens of years. And remember 48, let's not forget 48. Those people are refugees from 48, most of them. So, you know, propaganda can say everything. But by the end of the day, you should look at reality. And I want my last remark. You said it's not black and white. I want to claim here it is black and white. Because there is an occupier and there is an occupied one. And this claim that it is complex and there are many reasons here and there, no. It's again a way to clean ourselves, us Israelis, from any responsibility. Because if it's complex, so you know, so they have to take some guilt, and maybe us, maybe not. No, basically, it is black and white. The solution will be more complex, but basically, we deal here with a very basic injustice which takes place now for 70 years.
Yes, but you are talking about Hamas, and before these years of anger and desperation that you mentioned, you had Israeli cities being bombed by suicidal terrorists. There were, I think, more than 1,000 dead in those attacks. Before that, you had decades of Israeli-Arab wars, when also there was a feeling in Israel, or a narrative, that the country was under attack by a number of Arab countries, which were a lot larger, so it was an existential threat. First of all, can we talk about the trauma in the Israeli societies caused by this war and later terrorist attacks that justifies this support for the policies concerning Gaza and the West Bank? And second of all, concerning Hamas, we are nonetheless talking about an organization which ideologically is Salafi, so not very different from the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda. Excuse me for that. And which until recently didn't recognize the right of the state of Israel to existence. They wanted to just throw all the Jewish people into the sea. And one of the narratives of the Israeli government was, okay, if the people of Gaza really want change, they should overthrow Hamas. And it's not that easy, because you can't just tell them, okay guys, leave.
So first of all, about the trauma, yeah. Israelis had some tough years, mainly in the second Intifada. It was very tough. It was quite frightening to live in Israel. And still the sacrifice was always bigger among the Palestinians, and the trauma is much bigger among the Palestinians. The second Intifada was terrible. I think both peoples paid a hell of a price, both the Palestinians and the Israelis. But you cannot take it out of context, because the second Intifada came after the first Intifada. And the first Intifada came after 20 years of no uprising whatsoever. And what did you think? That the Palestinian people will live forever under the occupation and lean in front of their Israeli occupier and throw rice on them or greet them with flowers, their occupier? What did we expect? That they will sit silent forever and agree to the occupation? Do we know many examples from history in which peoples did not resist? And resistance is always violent. You can't help it because the occupier is violent and you have to react in a violent way. So there were the first 20 years that Israel had no signs whatsoever to put an end to the occupation. On the contrary, it started to build the settlements. And then came the first Intifada, which was much less violent, mainly uprising of stones. And Israel woke up for a moment, and we had the Oslo Accords after the Intifada. Without the Intifada, there would never be Oslo. because Israelis would think they can last forever, they can continue forever with their occupation. But after the first Intifada, Israel woke up a little bit. But then came this Oslo Accord, which went wrong. I don't know if it meant wrong, but it went wrong because it didn't touch the core issue, and the core issue are the settlements. And I can get to it later. And the Palestinians saw again that this leads us to nowhere. It's another trap. Because Oslo didn't improve the situation. On the contrary, you know that Israel had tripled the number of settlers ever since Oslo. This is not a peaceful intention to build more settlements. Because if you have any slight intention of putting an end to the occupation, you don't build even one house in the settlements. Israel not only continued to build, Israel not only never stopped building, it tripled the number of houses in the occupied territories. And the Palestinians saw this, and then they understood that this leads to nowhere, for sure not to the end of the occupation. And then came the second Intifada, which was very bloody and very, very violent and very cruel for both sides. Both sides, as I mentioned, paid the price. You speak about the trauma in Israel. Yes, there was a trauma in Israel, but there was a much bigger trauma in Palestine. And again, you have to ask yourself, why was the Intifada? It was only because the Palestinians like to kill Jews? Because they wake up and they ask themselves, what should I do today? Oh, I'll go to commit suicide, I'll bomb myself in a Jewish bus. Do we really believe that an 18, 19, 20-year-old guy goes to pay the biggest price he can pay by committing suicide and killing others for nothing? Or there is some kind of background, context to this, and the context is the occupation. I don't justify terror, by all means not. But you have to understand its roots. You have to understand the reasons, and there are reasons. And then after the second Intifada, again, Israel went back. And Israel had elected the most right-wing religious government ever. You speak about Hamas, who is a fundamentalist movement. Check the attitudes of some parties in the Israeli coalition. The religious one, the Messianic one. Those who think that the Palestinians are guests in this piece of land. What do you think they are? Are they any different from the Hamas fundamentalists? So by the end of the day, we stand today in this place where on one hand there is Hamas, on the other hand there is a very right-wing government in Israel who has no intention whatsoever to put an end to the occupation, don't even dream about it, don't even talk about it, obviously. And this is the status quo now, and some of you might believe this can last forever, maybe, and some of you might think that this cannot last forever, and it will end up in a terrible catastrophe. I don't know who are the right ones.
And what about the theory that if you pressure Gaza, then the people may rise against Hamas?
This was the theory when Israel went to war in Lebanon. This is the theory that Israel is practicing for 50 years now in the occupation. The wet dream is that they will be so badly treated that maybe they will leave one day, more than getting rid of Hamas. They will leave. This doesn't work. First of all, it's none of Israel's business who is ruling the Palestinians. None of our business. If they want Hamas, they have Hamas. Like it's none of the Palestinian business to tell who should be in the government in Jerusalem. But by the end of the day, it's also not working. It's not working. You will push and push and push, and it will do nothing. And what do you think will you get after Hamas will be gone? We had Yasser Arafat, who was the recognized leader of the entire Palestinian people. No Hamas there then. Did he get anything from Israel? Did he get independence or freedom or ending the occupation?
He got Nobel Prize.
Yeah, like Shimon Peres. And then Israel said, no, there is only one obstacle. Yasser Arafat. Once we get rid of Yasser Arafat, there will be peace. Be sure. Okay? Arafat died one way or the other, and came Abbas. And then came Abbas. What happened then? No, Abbas is too weak. He doesn't represent all the Palestinians. We can't do peace with him. Arafat was too strong, Abbas is too weak. And then Israel got this present called Hamas. You don't want us to sit with those fundamentalists. They will never make peace. So you know, excuses are always there. By the end of the day, one should ask himself only one question, basic question. Does Israel have the intention to put an end to the occupation, yes or no? Did Israel ever have the intention to put a full end to the occupation, yes or no? And unfortunately, the answer is no with capital N. And if you want proofs, there's one basic proof. Israel never stopped building settlements. And if you build settlements, you have no intention to put an end to the occupation. Very simple like this. So don't put anything on the Palestinians right now as long as Israel says no. And Israel always says no. What does it matter who is in Gaza? And you think that if a Zionistic movement will be elected in Gaza, you think that Israel will let Gaza free? Israel will end the occupation in the West Bank? Israel will let Palestinians feel equal human beings in this piece of land? No way.
Okay, what you mentioned are policies of the Israeli government, and especially right-wing governments, that didn't show generally that they are willing to take many steps towards peace. Although there were signs. I remember, for instance, Ariel Sharon deciding to remove the colonies from Gaza. But let's move on a little bit to the peace process. It was a lot of talk these days about the status of Jerusalem being in the way of the peace process. But it seems to me that there are other more pressing issues. One, for instance, we saw at the fence of Gaza, it's the right of return, because although the protests were connected with the American embassy moving to Jerusalem, and that was important because the media was over there, so it was a good opportunity to catch, to bring into attention the cause of Gaza. We have to remember that the protests were planned in advance for many months. It was the 70th anniversary of the Nabka Day. And one very important issue is that of the right of return. The protesters were actually saying that they want to return to their former houses in what is now Israel, which from many points of view you have to tell us. I'm not sure if it's possible. One of the arguments that I heard is that after 1948 there was some sort of an exchange of populations between the Arab world at large, Iraq, Yemen, Tunisia, and Israel. So Jewish people came to Israel, and Arab Muslim people especially left Israel. That is one. There is also the issue of the settlements, which you mentioned, and there are 750,000 people now in the colonies, in the settlements, and I can't imagine how would you move them. If we remember that when the settlements in Gaza were dismantled, there were, I think, 2,000 colonists, something like that.
7,000.
7,000. It was very hard. They resisted the IDF, and it took some time. So what do you think about the peace process? What are the main issues standing in its way?
First of all, I must repeat myself and say that the main issue, the main obstacle is the refusal of Israel to put an end to the occupation. That's the basic. You know, if I steal your car, I cannot call you and put conditions to return the car. I'm not in a position to do so, I'm sorry. First of all, return the car. Then we will talk about our relations, will we become friends, will I let you do this, I let you, but first of all you have to return the car. And the occupied territories are the minimum of the stolen car from the Palestinian people. And it should be returned. With peace, without peace, with agreement, without agreement. We are not in a position to put conditions to the Palestinians with all the respect. They deserve also some rights, you know. Because the occupied territories, it's only 22% of their historical land. So even the 22% you are in a position to put conditions and to say you want this, I will not give it if you want this, if you say this, you will not get this. No, I'm sorry. There is some basic justice also, not to speak about international law. And what Israel is doing is contradicting the international law wherever you just step. From the settlements through moving prisoners to Israel, which is a total violation of the international law, to the basic thing of occupation, which is violating the international law, one violation after the other. And you know, the international law counts also. With all the respect to the promise of God to Israel, and with all the respect to the feeling that we are the chosen people, by the end of the day there is an international law which must apply to any state in the world, for sure a state which presents itself as part of the liberal Western world. Now coming to the right of return. First of all, I must tell you that 20 years ago it was easier to make peace than today. And today it will be easier than in 20 years' time. Because time is working against. Because it is now new generations in both sides who are much more incited. Young Palestinians who never met an Israeli who is not armed and doesn't bark at them. And Israeli young generation who never met a Palestinian, except of in his army service. And then he thinks that any Palestinian he sees is suspected as a terrorist. Things become much worse. The right of return is a problem which must be solved and can be solved. How? The day there will be goodwill, we will solve it. Because I truly believe that the two-state solution will never be achieved. As you mentioned, with 700 settlers, nobody is going to evacuate 700 settlers. By the way, evacuating 7,000 settlers was extremely easy. Don't buy all those lies of the settlers. They try to make a show as if it's terrible. It went extremely easy, without any bloodshed. They made their play, tears, tragedies, being expelled, transferred. Okay, they made their show, but by the end of the day, nobody was injured, nobody was killed. It was because the majority of Israelis was backing it. And it went very easy. I don't want to say that 7,000 is like 700,000. I don't want to say that the West Bank is like Gaza, by all means no. But let's not overestimate what happened in the evacuation of Gaza. It went quite easily. It was all the shows that they've done. 700,000 is a new game. And I think that we missed the train. Yeah, the two-state solution is a train that left the station and will never be back there. And we have to draw the conclusions out of it. And we have to change the discourse. And we have to start to speak only about equal rights. Because equal rights is the basic justice for this piece of land. What will Israel say against equal rights? If Israel says no to equal rights, Israel declares itself officially, formally, as an apartheid state. Because if you say that one people has rights and the other people has no rights, and this is the permanent situation, you declare yourself as apartheid, and there is no other way to define it. That's apartheid, exactly.
Now, if we'll get to there, it's a long way to go, to a real just democracy with equal rights for everyone, one person, one vote, then the question of return will become a small question. Because there will be one state between the river and the ocean, and I'm talking about a reality that right now looks totally lunatic. But it was also totally lunatic in South Africa to believe that within few months, in the late 80s, within few months, apartheid regime will be replaced by democracy with all the problems there. It was totally unthinkable that in your country, Ceausescu will not stay forever. Who believed that the Berlin Wall will fall? Who believed that the Soviet Russia will fall? And it all happened in a most unexpected way. Nobody was expecting this. Nobody. So the law of return, the right of return, there will be never total justice. Because if all the Palestinians will get back exactly to the place that they were born, or their fathers, or grandparents, or grand-grandparents, they will become refugees. So you make one justice and you create a new injustice. It's not realistic and it's not moral. Because by the end of the day, we have also some rights in this piece of land, and therefore a total justice cannot be done. But it can be a relative justice. Some can get back. And if there will be a one-state solution, then there will be an immigration policy. Like any country, like your country. You have an immigration policy, and you decide about the quota, how many can come back, how many can immigrate, how many can't. And if it will be on an equal basis, without any privileges to the Jews, no privileges to the Jews, it is unheard of that a Jew from Russia whose grandfather was Jewish, has nothing to do with Judaism, can just land in Ben Gurion Airport and get the Israeli citizenship. And the Palestinian in Haifa, whose sister, who was born in Israel, in Palestine, is in the Yarmouk refugee camp struggling for her life in the Syrian war. And this guy from Haifa, who lives in Haifa, who is an Israeli citizen, full Israeli citizen, cannot bring his sister back home and save her life, only because she's not Jewish. Does this seem to you democratic? Does this seem to you justice? Both Israeli citizens, both born in this country, one can bring anyone and the other one cannot bring anyone? You really think that this is a moral basis for a just state? I think that no, and we'll have to correct it one day.
You mentioned the fall of apartheid in South Africa and the fall of communism, but in both situations, the context was really different. There was important international pressure on the South African government, so at some point they had to cave in. And also there was both an international pressure and an internal pressure related to economic reasons on the communist regimes throughout Eastern Europe, which is not the case in Israel and Palestinian territories now, because the international community seems only to do, especially when it comes to the Palestinian cause, to do mainly lip service. They condemn, they maybe adopt a UN resolution, but even, and I've noticed that for many years, not recently, the Arab world as a whole seems to have acquired fatigue towards the Palestinian cause. And more than that, the situation, the environment in the Middle East changed a lot during, let's say, the past 15 years, but maybe during the past several decades. I mean, you had recent developments like Saudi Arabia through its de facto ruler, Mohammed bin Salman, recognizing the right of Israel to exist, which was unheard of. You had dictators that were supporting with money different Palestinian groups and organizations, including terrorist ones like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, they're gone. Do you think anything can happen without the support of the international community and the regional one? And how can you rally that support, considering that there are a lot of more pressing issues like now, Syria and Iran, for instance?
Everything you mentioned is true. The comparison does not lead us to an identical reality. You didn't mention, if we speak about South Africa, you didn't mention two more factors. One is that the white ones were only 8%, and in Israel Palestine it's 50-50, as I say. They had a Mandela, which neither Israel nor Palestine has a Mandela. And obviously there are many more differences. Same for the Soviet bloc. But it's very clear that, at least in the case of South Africa, the contribution of the international community was fatal. Without the international pressure, maybe apartheid system would have stayed. And that's a lesson also for us. Because I don't believe that change will come from within Israel. It cannot come now because Israel has no incentive to change anything. Life in Israel is wonderful. Brainwash system is very efficient. Israel doesn't lose anything because of the occupation. Here, Romania is about to move its embassy to Jerusalem. What's wrong about the occupation? Look, the whole world is applauding us. Donald Trump gives us a carte blanche to do whatever we want. Why would Israel go for putting an end to the occupation, for a solution, for one state, two state, for any progress? Why? Everything is fine. And therefore, in my view, the role of the international community is not only important, it is crucial. That's the only hope I have now, because I have very little hope in any case. But if I have hope, it is from civil societies, from activists, from international activity. It worked with South Africa, and it should work also with Israel. That's the only game in town right now. There is no other game. Otherwise, I mean, the alternative is a terrible catastrophe, with a terrible bloodshed that I cannot foresee now. You mentioned the Arab world. Yeah, the Arab world really betrayed the Palestinians. And they are right now lonely, divided, lacking leadership like never before. But do you think this is good news for Israel or for peace or for justice, the fact that the Palestinians are so weak? By all means not. Because by the end of the day, they stay there. They are there to stay. They will not leave. So if they are so beaten, Israel thinks that it can do whatever it wants, and it can do right now whatever it wants. Israel has now really freedom like never before. If Israel wants to bomb now Gaza and kill hundreds of thousands of people, nobody would stop Israel. If Israel wants to bomb the West Bank, nobody would stop Israel, except, as you mentioned, the ordinary lip service, which Israel learned to ignore because it is meaningless. Really, the EU will publish a resolution condemning Israel. Israelis will not sleep at night when they will hear it, yeah? It is really meaningless. It becomes a farce. Each time that there is something, the EU is publishing a communicat and saying that the EU is worried about the chances for peace. Really, I mean, it is a joke. Because if you don't follow it with practical steps, it has no meaning. So there were years in which Israel was very nervous about each condemnation like this, until they learned that it is so empty and so hollow, there's no reason to even pay attention to it. I hope that change will come in the international community. That's my only hope.
Talking about Israel sleeping or not sleeping at night, you said recently during a conference in the United States that there is one thing that the government really seems to be worried about, and this is also one of your most controversial positions, at least in Israel, because you mentioned BDS and you came in support of BDS, which means boycotting Israel. So, talking about this kind of controversial point of view, points of view. How is it, as an Israeli and Jewish journalist or academic, because just next week we're going to have a new debate here at Frontline. How does it feel, how does it affect you to be against the mainstream and against what you called, I think, the two religions of Israel, Zionism and security?
First of all, to be against the mainstream is not such a hard job. I mean, when you look backwards in history, so many times, including in your country and many other countries, the mainstream was so wrong, and individuals who stood against the grain, against the mainstream was so right. I mean, this question doesn't bother me at all, on the contrary. Being against the mainstream is really, I mean, you pay some price personally, but I'm really not the issue. BDS is more problematic, and for many years I avoided it, because I really thought that as an Israeli, who lives in Israel, who doesn't boycott Israel, I don't boycott Israel, I boycott obviously the products of the settlements, but this is artificial. Because it's not the settlements, it's the Israeli responsibility for the settlements. It's not only the settlements. How can you, I mean, they are there because Israel agrees that they will be there, because Israel is financing them, because Israel is guarding them, because Israel is encouraging them. You can't say the settlements and I'm not part of it. I'm part of it. Like any other Israeli. We are all occupiers. Each of us carry a responsibility, each of us. So there is some hypocrisy to sit in Israel and to call others to boycott Israel. And therefore, I always try to refrain from this. Until I realized that that's really the only game in town right now. I wish it would not be the only game in town. I wish there would be other tools. But the fact is that that's the only effective tool right now. Look how nervous is Israel about BDS. That's the best sign that BDS is the right thing to do. Look how they became aggressive against anyone who supports BDS, who is some kind of activist in BDS. That's a proof that it might be effective. And therefore, with all the problematic point of it, the problematic aspect of it, I think that as someone who sees international pressure as the only way to make a change, I can't help it. I should support BDS and call people to join BDS, because this is right now the only effective game in town. There is no other game in town. And to be the minority in Israel, you know, there were better times, worse times. In 2014, I needed bodyguards to go out to the street, which was not very pleasant, especially after I realized that the bodyguards were settlers, so it became even more complicated. But by the end of the day, I'm really not the issue. Don't be wrong, I mean, my positions are really a tiny minority in Israel, obviously. But one thing must be mentioned. I still gain total freedom. And I don't take it for granted, because it will not last forever. But I still gain total freedom, and I highly appreciate it, both in my newspaper, obviously, but also from the government, from the military, from the secret services. I never had problems, and I can raise my voice in relatively total, I mean, not in relatively, in total freedom. I can write whatever I want. And I'm very appreciative about this, and I know not to take it for granted.
It's time now to move to the second part of our debate, giving the floor to questions from the public. I see that we have here many colleagues from the media. Some of them wrote about the conflict. Some of them have been there together with me, some in both Gaza and the West Bank. So please feel free to ask Mr. Gideon any questions.
Do we do it one by one?
Yes, one question per person, please.
So I don't have to remember.
Hello, my name is Alexander Perry. I'm from the Swedish Embassy. I'm the Deputy Head of Mission Swedish Embassy. We, like Romania, support the two-state solution and also recognize both Palestine and Israel. I would like to ask you a question about what, I mean, I've been following the conflict for many years, and I find that there has been a quite rapid radicalization in the Israeli society, where a couple of years ago it felt, at least, from being outside, I don't know, you know this better, but it felt that the peace camp and the alternative voices were stronger, and now you have a more extreme majority and that completely dominate the political landscape in Israel. And I would like to ask you why you think it is like that, and also if you see any signs of some kind of counter movement that you really believe are not only pragmatic.
Thank you very much. You should be very proud for being a Swede. I have a soft point towards Sweden because my partner is Swedish, so we love your country. I met your foreign minister more than once, and I tried to convince her to go for the one-state solution, and she listened. And she really left me with a very, very good impression. I really believe in her. She's a very genuine, really a woman of values. Now, as for your question, I don't know what was before, but today there is no alternative in Israel. Israel speaks more or less in one voice. The differences between Labour and Likud and the other parties may be difference in rhetoric, in style, not in substance. When it comes to the occupation, let's remember who is the founding father of the occupation. Is it Benjamin Netanyahu? Shimon Peres built more settlements than Benjamin Netanyahu. This Nobel Prize winner, that the Norwegians were kind enough to give him the Nobel Prize for Peace, built more settlements than Netanyahu. And the differences are really in rhetorics. And I'm afraid to say that there is no alternative. First of all, Netanyahu seems to stay forever, at least as many years as Ceausescu was in your country. And he's on the way there. I mean, he did already over the 10 years, and he might stay as many years as Ceausescu stayed. And I wish him a different end than Ceausescu. By all means not. He shouldn't end like Ceausescu.
That would be another 15 years.
I know, but he's on his way. He's today more popular than ever. The polls show only that he's increasing, and there is the feeling there is no one to replace him. But when you really judge the reality, I don't see that anyone in the political arena today who might replace him will go for any different policy. It will be more of the same. Yes, there will be more photo opportunities with the Palestinians, with the Americans, with the EU. They will maybe nicer to the EU, they will be nicer to your foreign minister, but by the end of the day it will come exactly to the very same. And this is because the peace camp in Israel was totally crashing. Now you ask why. So first of all, I'm not sure how solid it was from the first place. But in the year 2000, two major events happened which really killed the Israeli peace camp. First, it was the Second Intifada. Those exploding buses, the suicide bombers, really gave the Israelis, including the Israeli peace camp, the feeling that there is no path. And then came Prime Minister Ehud Barak, the so-called leftist, back from Camp David, and declared the lie that there is no Palestinian partner after the negotiation failed. And at this stage, what used to be the Israeli peace camp totally smashed, totally crashed, was smashed and totally crashed and never recovered. Now, in Israel today, to be a leftist is a curse. I mean, people curse each other, you are a leftist. That's a curse. It's not legitimate anymore to be a leftist in Israel. It's like treason, not less than this. It was never like this. And patriotism means being in favor of the right wing. More than this, who are the friends of Israel today? Look who are Israel's friends. Donald Trump. I think the only country in the world that he is a real hero in public opinion and in the government is Israel. I don't know one other country that Donald Trump is the hero. They name streets on him already. The second football team in Israel, Beitar Yerushalayim, wants to be named on his name. He's not popular in the United States like he's popular in Israel. And then come the other friends. And who are the other friends? Anti-Semites for Israel. It's a new movement, Anti-Semites for Israel. Evangelic right-wingers in the United States, some of you neighbors, who are, I don't want to call them anti-Semites, but right-wingers. Mr. Orban in Hungary is a great friend of Israel, and some others, and some unimportant countries. It is very clear that the right-wingers in Israel, together with the right-wingers in the world, are going hand to hand now. And again, I would like to ask myself, would I really like to be a friend of Donald Trump or of Mrs. Wallstrom? Whom do I prefer as a friend of Israel? The definition of friend of Israel changed. Because friend of Israel today means friend of the occupation. If you are not friend of the occupation, you are an anti-Semite. Very clearly. If you dare to criticize the occupation, you are immediately labeled as an anti-Semite, and you know it in your country. And you should reject it, but that's another subject. The Israeli camp, peace camp, is now non-existent. There are some very small groups, very devoted, very courageous, wonderful people, like Breaking the Silence and B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights and Mahsom Watch and many others, but they are very small in numbers, and they are totally delegitimized in Israeli society. They have no influence whatsoever. And therefore, I repeat on what I said already, don't expect any change from within Israeli society as long as nothing will change from the outside. I'm sorry to say so.
As you know, Romania was occupied country. Do you repeat often the end of occupied? What do you mean by this, the end of occupied? And occupied only by Israel?
I'm not sure I understood.
You always say the end of occupation will resolve the problem. Occupation of Israel.
Yeah.
Okay? Is only Israel occupation who occupied Palestine? It is only Israel who occupied Palestine.
Or what? And what is the alternative?
The occupation it is only from Israel, but
He's asking if only Israel is doing the occupation of the Palestinian
Who
land.
else? Who else?
this is what I ask.
No, I don't see anyone else.
Maybe there are more other.
Like who? Like whom?
World bankers, United States, France, England,
Yes.
United Kingdom, no?
There are many supporters to the occupation, you're right, but by the end of the day, it is Israel who...
Plus, how do you believe that would be end the occupation? First.
For example, if the United States one day will want the occupation to end, it will end within months. Within months. But the United States never wanted this. If the United States says a definite no, and not only says, because Israel is depending on the United States like never before, politically, economically, militarily, obviously, in many other ways. But this is so much far-fetched now, because when Donald Trump is in the White House, Barack Obama, who was 8 years in office, who was the biggest hope for ending the occupation, who really understood the problem, I believe, did nothing to put an end to the Palestinian occupation, but nothing. So we expect Donald Trump to do something, it's a joke. But by the end of the day, it is Israel's responsibility. Some others support it, yes. But by the end of the day, this is our responsibility because we are the occupier and the only occupier, absolutely.
My name is Claudia Pazingescu. I'm a lawyer and I've been to Israel and the territory 3 years ago, not with our colleague here, and I was writing. You mentioned the international law and the settlements that started immediately after 48, which is true. So my question has two aspects. First, you said we don't care who runs Gaza, we don't care what leader Palestinians choose, we don't care about that. And I think that's not true. You should care and you must care and you are obliged to care because if you want to get to the point, you also said the two-state solution is not possible anymore, and I agree with that. I think, unfortunately, we all agree with that. So if you agree with that, how we get to the point of rights if you don't care who they choose in Gaza or who they choose as leader? That's one. And you also said, okay, the occupation. So we discussed about occupation, the Israel being most likely an apartheid state in 2018, but the occupation started long ago. So why no voices until now? Why Israeli who are so honest today didn't speak decades ago? So that would be the question. Thank you.
The first question was?
Yeah. That's why I didn't say we don't care, I say we shouldn't care. It's not our business. You know, the Palestinians, it's not their business who is in the government in Jerusalem. And you can't expect them to have an influence about Jerusalem. It's, we elect our leadership and they elect theirs. But what I meant is that even when they had more moderate leadership, Israel did nothing with it. I can tell you here with all conviction that there was and never will be a more moderate Palestinian leader than Abbas. Never before and never again. What did Israel do with Abbas? Nothing. Neutralized him. Made him a collaborator with Israel. And didn't give him anything to support him or to strengthen him or to go to any kind of solution with him, any kind of progress with him. And there will never be a more moderate leader than Abbas in terms of Israel. I don't think you are in a position. Are you in a position to dictate Poland who will be the Polish government? Are you in a position to dictate Hungary who will be there? None of your business. It's none of our business who the Palestinians want. None of our business, with all due respect. Now, the second question was about the length of the occupation and where were the voices then. First of all, there were voices. There were always dissidents. There were always alternative voices. There were times in which they were even more courageous than my generation because they paid more of the price. It was much harder to speak about those issues in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s. You paid much more of a personal price than today. The voices were always there. But the system was fighting them and they were delegitimized. Like today. I want to give you the example of Breaking the Silence because it's an interesting example. Breaking the Silence is an organization of soldiers who were released from the army service and wanted to speak the truth about their army service. I always believe that once soldiers will start to speak up, there will be a change. Because this is not this Gideon Levy, the traitor, the liar. Those are soldiers who had been there and confess after a few years of serving in the army. I really thought that the Israeli society will get shocked for what they will hear. And then came this organization, wonderful organization, Breaking the Silence, and the whole system, media and government, smashed them within months and delegitimized them. And they had no influence. They have 1,000 soldiers who gave testimonies about what they've done in the occupation. 1,000 testimonies. And nothing. They are all labeled as liars, as traitors. They are not allowed to enter schools for lectures. They are not allowed to appear in any public place. They killed them. So the voices are there. They are not strong enough, they are not influential enough, because it is very hard to fight the whole system. And the whole system is very strong, and today stronger than ever. And it's a collaboration of the media, with the government, with the army, with the secret service, all together. When it comes to the occupation, it's all together singing one song. I hope I answered the question.
It's a lot to discuss. Partially, yes, I know breaking the silence.
Yeah.
I met them recently.
Wonderful.
But what I meant is that Israel will recognize the rights of Palestinians if they have consistent leadership and they give up terrorism. That's what I implied in my first question.
Yeah, you're right. There were years in which there was no terrorism and Israel didn't recognize any rights. And there were years of Mahmoud Abbas, who is against terror, and Israel does not recognize any rights. And by the end of the day, I get back to what I said before. Israel is not in a position to put in conditions to the occupied one. With all the respect. First, put an end to the occupation. Then we'll talk about rights or not rights. First, make some kind of justice to the Palestinian people before anything else. You are not, I mean you, me, I'm not in a position to put conditions to the Palestinians, for God's sake. After 70 years of taking their lands, taking their homes, transferring them from their villages, destroying 400 villages in 48, occupying the rest of the land in 67, until when you think Israel can do whatever it wants and still say, we put conditions, you must behave like this or you must behave like this. With all the respect, it's now on our shoulders.
Thank you for your speech. I don't know. Victor Chonga is my name. The question is the following. You mentioned that there is a quasi support of the political class and even for the public for that move with moving the embassy in Jerusalem. But Israel is a regional player, and there were some changes in the alliances of Israel in the very last months. I mean, with Saudi Arabia. On the other hand, there is an aggressive talk, discourse. About Iran and the development of the situation in Syria and Iran. Do you think that there will be the same support of the whole political class for Israel involvement in Syria and maybe in Iran? Because I saw the declaration of Ehud Barak, and that raised me some questions.
I think that there is quite a wall-to-wall support in Netanyahu's policies toward Iran. And even if you will go to attack Iran, God forbid, there will be a quite massive support in Israel. If it will go wrong, then there will be opposition. But if it will work well, he will gain full support. In Israel, as you quoted me rightly, one of the two religions is called security. And when it comes to security, people are silent. No criticism, no opposition, nothing. All the wars that Israel declared on Gaza, on Lebanon, always started with a total support, wall to wall, except of the Palestinian party, wall to wall. Total support. When it went wrong, then there was an opposition. But when it starts, it's always totally supported.
What do you mean making being wrong or bad or good? Because, you attack Iran, what will go wrong? What means going wrong? What means going wrong?
No, if it will turn into a catastrophe. You know, a war with Iran can become a catastrophe. This is what I mean, go wrong. Go right is that Israel will bomb some nuclear facilities in Iran, Iran will not react or will react in a very low key. Israel will bomb more or whatever, and it will pass without too much price and too many sacrifices. If this will be the case, it will be a great success for Israel, and Israelis will support it, but you cannot tell before.
And let's hope that will not be no war.
Let's hope, all of us, for sure, because the risk is enormous. But the support to begin a war is always given in Israel. There was not one single war which didn't start in Israel without a total wall-to-wall support by the public and by the parties. Then the question raises, but it's always after there are victims, there are sacrifices, there are killed people, injured people.
It was at that moment Ashkenazi was the chief of staff. He was against bombing Iran a few years ago, and also in that milieu the relations with Saudi Arabia were not good, and that the plane should have passed through Iraq, and Iraq means Americans and so on. So also the military and the services can make assessment of the future
Excuse me, the rule of the debate is one question per audience. Thank you. Someone else? Please.
Thank you.
And before that, until the microphone starts working, we have 8 minutes to go. So maybe 2 more questions.
In 8 minutes we'll solve all the problems. Yeah, we'll hear you.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's working. Thank you. Thank you for receiving me. My name is Stefan Flora. I'm a member of a new pan-European political party. You heard about it in the future, I hope. Anyway, in the beginning of your speech, you mentioned that Romania is basically supporting the occupiers there without getting anything in return. However, a couple of days ago, the leader of the main political party in Romania that's in power right now, together with the Prime Minister, went there and met the officialities there. After that, the President, which is basically opposing the idea of moving the embassy, raised the idea that maybe the Prime Minister, together with the leader of the political party, made some deals with the Jewish, as the President said. Is anything that Romania could gain out of this war and out of supporting Israel? Is anything that Mr. Dragnea, together with the Prime Minister, could have been promised from the Jewish officialities?
First of all, I don't know. I can just guess. Moving the embassy now, I think is aimed at Israel, but more than this is aimed at Donald Trump in the White House. And here, I guess Romania can gain. Again, I don't know, because I'm not an expert to the relationship between Romania and the United States, even not to the question of Romania-Israel. I think that by the end of the day, those who support moving the embassy would never have done it if the United States wouldn't have done it, obviously. Because there were so many years to do so and nobody did it. It's only because Donald Trump did it. So those who think that Donald Trump is the right person to rely upon, and Donald Trump is a real leader that one should coordinate with its policies, by the end of the day, I really think it has much more to do with the United States than with Israel. Because what can Israel offer Romania? Weapons. You will get them in any case. Israel is happy to sell weapons to any country and to any regime in the world, by the way. Any regime. I was once in Sri Lanka when there were the rebels there, and I realized that Israel is selling weapons to both sides. And they are fighting each other with Israeli weapons. So Israeli weapons you'll get in any case, if you want. And I can't think about what can Israel do for Romania. The United States can do for Romania, and I think that's the main aim. But you know about it more than I do.
Just one more question.
Hello, my name is Stefan and I'm a journalist. I would like to ask you about your EU policy, because you said they should be more effective. Do you think that we will ever see the European Union adopting sanctions against officials or generals from Israel, like they did in the Russians' case when they annexed Crimea? Do you think that on the same topic the foreign minister from Palestine made an appeal today to the Arab country that they would all withdraw their ambassadors from Washington. Do you think that we will ever see that? Thank you.
You were laughing while asking the question, so you know the answer. And you mentioned, rightly so, the EU position toward Russia, which was amazing. A few weeks after invasion into Crimea, the EU put sanctions on Russia. 50 years after the Israeli occupation exists, and the EU is even not considering any steps against Israel. Now, the relations between EU and Israel is complex. The history, the Holocaust is in the background and should be in the background. Should be in the background. I don't want to ignore it. It is harder for sure for Germany, but also for other countries, to get aggressive toward Israel. But by the end of the day, also the EU should ask itself, is it really friendship toward Israel to support Israel blindly and automatically? Is it friendship to Israel to support this occupation which leads also Israel to a catastrophe, which corrupts Israel from all sides, which makes Israel rotten morally? Is it really friendship and caring to Israel? And above all, the question is, does the Holocaust, or does the past, or does history, which should be taken into consideration, don't get me wrong, we cannot ignore history because it happened in my father and my parents' generation. It's not we are talking about 500 years ago. But does this give Israel total immunity and gives Israel the right to do whatever it wants? We had once a prime minister, Golda Meir, who said once that after the Holocaust, the Jews have the right to do whatever they want. I totally disagree with this.
You can read more of Mr. Gideon Levy's opinions in Haaretz. You can find it online. Thank you for being here and coming to Romania. Thank you Frontline Club Bucharest for organizing the debate, and of course the Czech Center for hosting it.
And thank you for the wonderful questions. Those were really wonderful questions. Your questions and your questions. Really, thank you very much.
Am posibilitatea, eu știu că net o adresă de mesaj să adresez și eu. Habar n-am, nu știu, discutați cu organizatorii, cu front. Cred că cel mai ușor să contactați ea. Via Harezan, cuvântul.